One night, after a long day of fetch quests from the guild board, Arthur and Sora sat in the upstairs room provided by the guild, talking quietly. Sora stared at Arthur. He was adjusting well, she thought to herself. As if out of nowhere, Arthur spoke up. "Do me a favor," he said. "If it ever looks like I'm going to lose myself, keep me grounded. I don't want to think of myself as a god." He looked up at Sora. "Or the next demon lord," he added. Sora understood what Arthur meant. The demon lord had become so powerful that he saw himself as more than human, separate and above everyone else. Arthur had explained it to her as the demon lord having no connection or value for life anymore. Sora stood inside the barrier Arthur had left around her and the small group of demi-humans. She looked up at him, a darkened silhouette floating high in the sky on his magical platform, aura blazing. "Arthur," she said, voice filled with worry. Without another thought, Sora rushed from the protection of the barrier. She ran toward the gate, demanding the guards open it, announcing her name with all the authority she could muster. The gates cracked open just enough for her to slip through. Arthur stood on his platform high above the kingdom, his aura still all-encompassing and darkening the sky. He looked down at the creatures below, his eyes glowing with blue energy. The horde stretched out for miles, feverishly pounding, scratching, and gnawing at the wall. For the first time, Arthur had lost all control. His anger completely overrode his fear. Without speaking, without even looking away from the horde, he opened a portal next to him and reached his arm inside. He pulled out a round crystal ball. He had connected the portal to the guild hall's magical tool room. Arthur poured his magic into the crystal ball. As soon as it started to crack, he teleported it down into the heart of the horde. A massive mushroom cloud erupted, visible even from the castle. Arthur repeated the process, grabbing another crystal ball, fusing it with overwhelming magic, and teleporting it into the horde. He did this again and again, running through about 10 crystals. The battlefield was in complete disarray. More than half the goblins, orcs, and kobolds had perished. The rest were desperately attempting to flee. Arthur still didn't pause. He lifted an arm into the air. Lightning bolts began rapidly striking from the sky, powerful enough to turn the ground below into glass. Finally, still floating on his platform above the battlefield, Arthur reached down with his hand. With a simple flipping motion, he heaved the ground beneath the creature's feet upward. Massive boulders erupted, burying the remaining monsters. Sora, having slipped back through the gate, ran up to the nearest guard. "Where's Archmage Black?" she asked urgently. The guard pointed along the top of the wall, facing out toward the battlefield. "Great." Sora nodded and headed for the stairs leading up to the battlements. As she climbed the spiral staircase, a gigantic boom shook the walls, and the ground trembled. Sora braced herself, then pushed onward. Another boom. The walls shook again. "I'm coming, Arthur. Just hold on." Sora rounded the corner at the top of the wall, just as another massive explosion went off. The sonic boom pushed her back a step. She looked out into the distance and saw the floating silhouette of Arthur, dark against the background, with numerous mushroom clouds rising on the other side of the massive earth wall he had erected. "Archmage Black!" Sora yelled, looking around desperately. He had been around long enough to remember her when she was little. A guard pointed. "He's over there." Archmage Black stood at the edge of the wall, looking out at the chaos. Sora could hear one of the guards next to Black quietly praying, "We are doomed." Sora ran up to Archmage Black, desperate. "Black, you have to help me," she exclaimed. He turned to her just as another large mushroom cloud erupted in the background, shaking the castle walls they stood upon. "What are you doing here?" Black asked. "Shouldn't you be back at the castle and shelter?" "Never mind that," Sora exclaimed. "I need your help." They both flinched as another sonic boom went off. Sora looked out and saw lightning raining down among the strange fiery explosions rising into the sky. "I insist," Archmage Black tried to tell her, but she cut him off. "I need you to teleport me to the man floating in the sky." Sora pointed to Arthur, who could still be seen floating in the distance, a dark silhouette against the sky, the entire kingdom enveloped in his aura. Sora looked desperate. Archmage Black looked at her, then back at the dark figure floating in the sky. "Do you know who that is?" he asked. Sora nodded. "Yes, But right now I need to get to him, she said. All right, all right, Archmage Black said, holding his hands up in surrender. I don't have the ability to do it on my own. We'll need a couple other mages to assist. Are you sure about this? He looked back at the figure. Once you're out there, we can't protect you. I know, Sora said, looking out toward Arthur. I know. The demon lord sat upon his broken throne, watching the events unfold through his magical window with great amusement. He had tried to provoke this reaction earlier by bringing Arthur to the very brink of death, but Arthur had held out, not the result he had expected. So he had sent in a massive horde of his agents instead. If Arthur's near-death experience didn't cause him to release his full power, maybe hurting the ones around him will accomplish that goal. The demon lord watched Arthur rampage through the horde, his red eyes gleaming with dark delight. You're so close, Arthur, he murmured, leaning forward. All this power, it corrupts. He smiled. Let's see what you do when you run out of beasts to kill. King Arion Voss stood on the royal balcony, hands gripping the stone railing as he watched giant mushroom clouds rise in the distance over the northern plains. They matched the frantic reports the guild receptionist had delivered. Multiple citizens, and even some of his own guards, had witnessed the strange explosions. According to her, it had happened at the exact moment that boy, Arthur, supposedly overloaded a dysfunctional manosphere during his guild test. The king turned sharply to a nearby attendant. Send someone to check the guild hall's magical tool room immediately. Report back at once. Not long after, the attendant returned with the news. All of the crystals used for detecting someone's mana output are gone, Your Majesty. The king's expression darkened as he stared out at the distant clouds once more. Arthur stood on his magical platform, looking down at the plains. The land was partially turned to glass, with uprooted masses of earth distributed throughout the battlefield. Right here, right now, I have the power to change the world, Arthur thought. I can shape it into something better. He paused. He had heard this kind of thinking before, but was it important? On the wall, Sora stood with Archmage Black, Mage Pike, and Mage Veiler. Veiler was yelling at both Sora and Archmage Black. Have you both lost your minds? He screamed. There's no way I'm throwing a member of royalty out there. I knew you looked familiar when I saw you at the village. He looked directly at Sora. Mage Pike remained mostly indifferent while the argument continued. Arthur, still in a haze, only really knew one thing. There were still creatures below. He raised a hand high above him. Meteor, as if the heavens were parting. The dark sky created by Arthur's aura split open. An asteroid the size of a small island came into view, engulfed in flames. Then Arthur heard it, faintly at first. Arthur! Then louder. Arthur looked. He saw Sora in the sky above him, falling, screaming his name. Arthur! Sora continued screaming as she zipped by him. Arthur's eyes widened. Sora, he whispered to himself. Before Arthur had fully snapped out of his haze, the massive meteor he had summoned began to dissipate, never reaching the ground. Arthur warped down, catching Sora mid-fall. He created another magical platform beneath them, so they could stand while he held her in his arms. Arthur, Sora whispered, reaching up to hug him tightly. Just then, Arthur's aura dissipated. The dark sky with its strange new stars faded away, replaced by the normal daylight sun. As the earthen wall Arthur had created began to break down, the entire king's forces, standing upon the castle wall, were finally revealed to the utter chaos and devastation that had lain on the other side. What if I didn't come out of it? Arthur asked, looking at Sora. You and I would have fallen. Sora replied softly. I told you, if you get lost, I'll find you. She added, almost guiltily. I'm sorry, Arthur. I had to get help to get out here. They're going to find out who you are now. Sora looked down, as if she knew she had disappointed him. Arthur just held her a little tighter and said quietly, It's okay. I might have gone a little too far. Arthur warped himself and Sora back to the front gate. There, they found the soldiers had started milling down from the top of the wall and slowly coming out through the open gates. They watched in stunned silence as Arthur materialized in front of them, still holding Sora. He gently set her down beside him. Whether he was prepared for this or not, there was no getting out of it now, and they both knew it. Arthur and Sora began walking toward the gate. A messenger on horseback came riding up. "Sir Arthur, Lady Sora, your presence is required in front of the king." Following closely behind the messenger were 12 royal knights in full ceremonial armor. Sora looked over at Arthur and grabbed his hand. Together, they walked through the gates. The guards on either side stepped back, giving Arthur plenty of room. The city streets were eerily quiet as they made their way toward the castle, hand in hand. Arthur and Sora followed the messenger, with the 12 royal knights marching behind them in formation. They walked through the city streets as curious onlookers watched from windows and doorways. The city had finally quieted down after hours of the walls and the very ground shaking from the distant explosions. They reached the castle gates and entered. Arthur and Sora stepped into the throne room. King Arion Voss sat upon his throne alone. The only other people present were knights in full armor, hands resting on their weapons at the ready, standing on either side of the hall. Arthur and Sora continued walking forward and stopped a respectful distance in front of the king. The air was heavy with tension. Arthur and Sora stopped in front of the king. He looked down on them with a stern face. "The devastation out there is going to set this kingdom back years. The mage's preliminary reports say that a third of our farmland has turned to glass." He paused, letting it sink in. "That's just what we can see from the castle walls. And the craters." The king put a hand on his forehead in exasperation. "I spoke to the receptionist that administered your test. She explained to me what happened with the crystal ball, and the reports I got from the guards on the wall match what we've seen today." Sora looked over at Arthur in confusion. Arthur's response was a look of guilt and an "I'll tell you later" glance. "I also spoke to Archmage Black." The king now looked directly at Sora. Turning back to Arthur, the king asked, "Everything points to you, Sir Arthur. Is there anything you'd like to add? Tell me, what happened out there?" Arthur thought about his answer for a moment. He still needed to be careful. "I believe the demon lord is behind this," Arthur said. The king instantly replied, "Explain." "No one has seen the demon lord in almost 200 years now." Arthur explained that when Sora first brought him here to be treated, the demon lord had teleported him away in an attempt to recruit him, saying they could shape the world as they saw fit. Arthur had turned him down, of course, and the demon lord had then brought him within an inch of his life. What Arthur didn't tell the king was that while he was hovering in the sky, he had, in that moment, understood the demon lord's position, felt his righteousness, no matter how wrong it may have been. "I'm not sure what his overall plan is," Arthur continued. "I really didn't see another way of dealing with the horde." Arthur, no matter the reason, did feel guilty about the destruction he had left behind, and it showed on his face. The king cut in. "On the contrary, Sir Arthur, you saved this great nation and rescued many of its people. The damage is substantial, yes, but I'm sure it's something the mages can handle in time." The king continued, "Now that we've truly established who you are, what do you say, Arthur? Will you swear loyalty and fealty to me and this nation?" The king looked down at them from his throne, awaiting an answer. "About that," Arthur said with a low voice. He looked over at Sora, then back at the king with a more determined look. "I must decline, King Arion Voss. This nation's treatment of the demi-people was shameful. They were left out there to die. I even found merchants using some as human shields." The king cut Arthur off. "Because of the demons, you say. I hold no hate for their kind, but they are demons." Arthur reaffirmed his answer and denied the king yet again. The king replied, almost in a joking tone, "I could force you to stay," phrasing the statement more as a question than a demand. The guards standing on either side of the room stepped forward nonetheless. Arthur thought back to the demon lord and his grand statement. "Who can stop me?" Arthur finally spoke up. History, it seemed, was repeating itself. The king looked at Arthur in confusion. "I'd like to try a different way," Arthur continued. "I don't know what the future will bring. I know where that phrase and that road lead. It's not a good one, so I'll say it again. I respectfully decline your offer, and I'd like to try something different." "Where will you go and what will you do?" the king asked. "Explore," said Arthur. "Travel the world. See what's out there." Arthur and Sora turned and headed out of the king's throne room, Arthur unsure of their next steps. Arthur and Sora sat at a quiet table in the guild hall, eating a simple meal and discussing their next plans. "So, do you think they'll make a move against us?" Arthur asked, a little concern in his voice. "Not with me with you," Sora replied. "I doubt it. Plus, they've seen what you can do." "Maybe," Arthur replied. "I'd rather not do that again." Then, more playfully, he asked, "So why aren't you a princess? Your father's older than the king." Sora smiled softly. "My father was never a very serious man. Being king sounded like very serious work." "I'd agree with that statement," Arthur replied with a chuckle. "We need to go pick up supplies yet?" Arthur said, smiling at Sora. "Luckily, I can store whatever we need inside my magic storage space. We can head out in the morning." They finished eating and headed out from the guild to the market. They picked up smoked meat, grain, and other essentials. Arthur didn't grab any water. He could conjure it when they needed it, and that way he knew it would be clean. They stopped at the potion shop and grabbed some potions. Arthur also looked at weapons and armor, knowing he didn't really need any, but the idea still seemed really cool to him. Sora laughed, confirming he was weird. They finished up and headed back to the guild for the night. Tomorrow, their new journey would start. Arthur woke up in the middle of the night and found Sora lying on the bed sleeping next to him. He thought about moving for a minute, but he was too tired. He laid back down and quickly fell asleep. The next morning, Arthur and Sora gathered their things into their spatial storage. Sora looked at Arthur with a hint of jealousy. She couldn't fit nearly as much as he could into her spatial ring. They both walked downstairs side by side, not knowing when they would be back to this city. Arthur and Sora paused at the exit to the city gate. They looked at each other, then back at the city, and continued out through the gate onto the old battlefield that Arthur had completely eviscerated just a few days ago, turning most of the farmland to glass and leaving cratered potholes. It was about half a day's travel before they finally left the scarred lands behind and entered the open plains. If they walked north long enough, a few months' journey, they would reach the edge of the glowing forest where Sora had first found Arthur. To the east and west lay other nations, so north it was. A couple days into their journey, Sora suddenly stopped Arthur and pulled him to the side. "Arthur, I think we're being followed," she said, pointing off into the distance. "There, on the horizon, you could see faint shapes. We should check it out," Arthur replied. In a panic, Sora called out his name, reaching for him. "Arthur!" She looked up at him and saw he was standing there smiling at her, hand held out. Calm suddenly rushed over Sora. She smiled back and grabbed his hand. "Warp!" Arthur warped them both to the group on the horizon. Arthur and Sora warped in to where they had seen the group on the horizon. In front of them stood a small group of demi-humans, mostly fox people. They looked almost completely human to Arthur, if not for their fluffy ears and tails. He couldn't tell if they were all the same species. Some had brown fur matching the hair on their heads, others gray and black. All of them couldn't have been much younger than Sora and himself. "Why are you following us?" Arthur asked the group. One of the shy fox girls stepped forward. "We have nowhere to go," she said. "No one's ever protected us before." She paused before speaking again. "We don't care that you're human. Please let us come with you. Our old village is gone, and there's no one willing to protect us here. Lots of dangerous creatures out here." The young fox girl said this while looking around timidly. Arthur replied a bit embarrassingly, "I think most of them are on the endangered species list right now." Still feeling guilt over the damage. "Endangered species?" the young fox girl repeated, confused. Arthur turned and looked at Sora. "What do you think? Are you okay with this?" he asked, looking between her and the fox girl. Sora, with a smile on her face, replied simply, "I go where you go." "Well, all right," Arthur said, scratching his head. "Well, we can't simply wander around aimlessly now, can we? I'll have to come up with a different plan." A few days later, Arthur, Sora, and the small group of demi-humans came across an abandoned village. It was clearly once attacked sometime in its past. The village consisted of nothing more than a few simple grass and mud huts. There were no proper roads, unless you counted the mud-turned ground as roads. Arthur turned and looked at the group. "Well, it's not much, but I'm sure we can fix it up. It's a roof over our heads." He looked at Sora. then back at the group. "This will serve as our base for now," Arthur said. The fox demi-humans looked around with a mix of nervousness and quiet hope. One of the younger fox girls stepped a little closer, ears twitching. "You really mean it? We can stay here?" Arthur nodded with a small smile. "Yeah, we'll make it work." Sora stood beside him, quietly watching the group and the ruined village. A new beginning, however humble, was starting. If you enjoy these stories, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help this channel grow so I can continue to improve and provide a wide variety of stories. Thanks for watching.